Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for joining the Leadership Development, Investing in, and Enhancing Council Member Leadership Skills. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Today, we are going to explore leadership development and the benefits of furthering the leadership development of council members. You'll hear about the practice of using council self-assessments, and we're going to showcase a variety of leadership development approaches used by councils. We have a lot of presenters today, so we're going to give just a very short introduction, but full bios are available on the itachelp.org website, which is in the chat. We're going to hear from Caitlin Bailey, PhD, and Kristen Loomis, who are co-directors of the National Leadership Consortium. Brandy Montz is the executive director of the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council. Sydney Krebsbach is an individual with autism and is one of the two co-chairs for the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council. Kimberly Mercer Slider, sorry, I know I butchered that, is the executive director of the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities. Bob Peterson is currently a board member for the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities. Dave Duell, PhD, currently serves as a chairperson for the New York State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Kristen Larson has served as the executive director for the Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities since 2014. Matthew Caslin is currently the vice chair for the Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities. And with that, I'll pass the time over to Caitlin and Kristen.
Excellent. Thank you, Ricky. And good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are calling in from. So as we get started, first I will do a quick introduction of myself and then turn it to Caitlin to introduce herself, and then we'll get started. So my name is Kristen Loomis Greenidge. I am one of the co-directors of the National Leadership Consortium. We are a virtual organization, but I reside outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a white woman with long brown hair, and I am wearing a pink shirt today. Caitlin, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks so much. I am Caitlin Bailey. I am, like Kristen and Ricky said, the other co-director of the National Leadership Consortium. I am also a white woman with brown hair that's pulled back. In my late 30s. I've got big old glasses on, and I've got like a purpley swirly shirt.
So as introduced today, we are going to be talking about leadership and investment and opportunity. So first talking about the why, getting a little bit into what are some of the outcomes when we think about investing in leadership development as it relates to organizations. So a lot of the research has been done around staff investment, but really this is very applicable and easily transferred over to thinking about how we're engaging our members at our councils and how all of you are doing that already, and what are some opportunities to do some more of that. As shared, we will leave you with a resource list of some assessments that you may want to check out, as well as some details about what it could look like to really understand how you are currently investing in the development of your members, and what are some opportunities to do perhaps more or to add on to what you're already doing. So to start, just to give a quick overview of the National Leadership Consortium, if you have not had a chance to know about us previously, the National Leadership Consortium was founded in 2006 by our two co-founders, Nancy Weiss and Steve Eidelman. And that was really in recognition of the need for development of a next generation of leaders in the disability service sector. And really recognizing that also for those leaders who were already in leadership positions, there wasn't any specific training that was available for leaders within this field. There was a lot of great, more generalized leadership training. There were a lot of great trainings and opportunities to come together at conferences, but nothing that really blended the two. So the National Leadership Consortium was created to provide quality values-based training, technical assistance, research, and evaluation aimed at developing the skills, knowledge, resources, and networks of leaders so that organizations and systems can best support people with disabilities to direct their services and lives, and to fully belong in their chosen communities. We have a number of values that underpin and flow through all of our programming, all of the way that we operate, and those will come through in some of the ways that we talk about the work that we do today, and if you've ever had an opportunity to work with us previously. But those values are around authentic leadership, human dignity and rights, inclusion, networking and collaboration, and responsiveness. And we have provided more information about our organization in our materials. So if you would like to check a bit more out about those values and how we enact them in our work, you'll have the resources to do so. Our organization really focuses on different trainings, programming, research and evaluation, customized support that focus on these 5 areas. And those 5 areas on the screen are best practices and services and supports, which is really recognizing what are the ways that we are working together as a system, nationally, internationally, to recognize what people want and need from our service system and how that is coming through in the way that we're operating. Thinking about current and future trends impacting services and supports. So really thinking about what are the things that are coming down the pike, kind of what are we currently doing, but what should we be planning for as we continue forward? What are the resources, knowledge, education, future policies, all of that all of your councils are working towards, are working to bring into light to help organizations in your states and nationally meet those needs and expectations. We also look at and think about and help people to grow in their individual leadership and in their interpersonal leadership. So recognizing the power and the influence that we as individual leaders can have when we understand our strengths and can build on those, and also the opportunities to think about our interpersonal leadership and how are we working together with others within our states, within our systems to make things happen, to use our strengths and skills combined with others to make that happen. And lastly, thinking about systems and organizational best practice and change management, really recognizing what are the areas and the ways that we are helping leaders to recognize their potential, to use those skills and strengths to make changes in their organizations, their systems, their states. And all of that really comes together again in the 3 areas that we really do work. And I'll just read through these quickly, but we'll provide a little bit more information for you again in our resources. But just want to give a background for why we're on here today talking about this. We have 3 different areas that we focus on: training and programs, research and evaluation, and customized support. Our training and programs are tailored leadership development, training, and support opportunities that meet the specific developmental needs of emerging and established leaders in the field. So we have lots of opportunities to work with leaders from nationally and internationally around this idea of development, thinking about and helping those leaders to look at what are my skills, strengths, what are opportunities that I have to continue developing, and what are the opportunities then that come from being more aware of and in tune with my leadership skills. Research and evaluation, and really focus on leadership and relevant research, evaluation, and assessment for field leaders that's designed to enhance accessibility of information and bridge research to practice. So a lot of what we'll be doing today is talking about what does our research show us and how can we be using that in our councils and in some of the ways that we're looking at developing our members. And lastly, our customized support, which is tailored to the goals and needs of the people and organizations that we work with to enhance, transform, and develop, enhance transformation and development efforts of leaders, organizations, and systems. So we'll be making the connection today of how leadership development, focusing on that development of your members, can really help to enhance the efforts of your councils in some of those organizational and systems-wide efforts that you're engaged in. So what we know through our work is that organizations are looking at ways to keep their staff and members engaged. This is true across our system, across our sector. It's true in other sectors as well. And it's true for your council staff, but it's also true for your council members, right? And what we know is that the research shows this is crucial, but so many times it's not happening. Some of the research on here is just a drop in the bucket of what we know about employee engagement and how employees, staff, members, are engaged in the work that we're doing. And so today, when we talk about employees or organizations, we are talking about that interchangeably with the idea of staff, members, and your councils as organizations. We know that companies or councils with a highly engaged workforce are 21% more profitable and 17% more productive than those with disengaged staff. And really what that means for the work that we're talking about today is, although yes, profitable could mean different things in our councils, we're really looking at that productive. How productive are we in pulling together our resources, our members, our staff, and making things happen, reaching our goals, making that impact that we're looking at? We know that on average, disengaged employees cost companies $3,400 for every $10,000 they make each year, which in council terms, in terms of members, this is not as critical. We're not thinking about how are we paying employees, things like that. But what it does show is that there is a cost associated with disengagement, right? There's a cost associated with trying to pull people back into being engaged in the work that you're doing. And once we have them in that work, how do we retain them? How do we keep them engaged? And we know that if we can do that, we can overcome some of these costs, some of this lost productivity. Research does show that 85% of employees are not engaged at work. And so if we're not engaged at work, we're not engaged in these activities that we have, such as being members on councils. And so how do we really shape that engagement? How do we keep people engaged? Because the last piece of research on the slide here shows that highly engaged employees are 87% less likely to leave their employer. And so when we're thinking about members and what this could look like, this could really help with that retention piece, retaining members, bringing them into the work that we're doing. And then we'll talk in a couple of slides about how that also helps us to attract other members and retain those that we have. So for councils, this is important for not only staff members, but for members too. Engagement of members is key to carrying out council's mission in identifying the most pressing needs of people with developmental disabilities in their state or territory, and commit to advancing public policy and systems change that help those individuals gain more control over their lives. So members and engaged members can play a huge factor into the work that we do. And I know all of you know this. As we're looking at what we're really talking about when we mean employee engagement or engagement in general, this is really the emotional commitment that the employee or the member has to the organization or to the council and its goals. This is not about happiness. It doesn't mean satisfaction. What it means is the way that we are looking at and thinking about how we're committed to the work that's being done, how we're feeling that emotional tie. And we know that many of our members in our councils do have a connection to the work that we're doing, right? And that's why they got engaged in our work in the first place, most likely. They have a connection to it, a personal, professional, whatever connection that might look like. But when we're looking at and thinking about engagement, to work to address identified needs through advocacy, systems change, and capacity building efforts like the council does that promote self-determination, integration, and inclusion, councils need members who are continuously engaged in the work and bringing more members into that work. What we know is that COVID and a lot of the recent past issues or challenges and difficulties that we have seen really impacted engagement. We were at an all-time high in 2019 of engagement across industries, and that really tampered off as we look through, or really dropped dramatically as we're looking at the through the pandemic. And we have seen some bright spots in some of that picking up. And so what we're going to share today are some of the strategies and ways to kind of continue that engagement. We know that things like clarity of expectations have impacted people's engagement. They don't understand what's expected of them. There's not as much of a connection to the mission or purpose of the company. Some of this could have been dealt with or could have been impacted because of feeling a disengagement or not as strong of a connection to others doing this work as well. There haven't been as many opportunities to learn and grow, opportunities to do what employees or members do best. And there was a lack of feeling cared about at work. And some of these things may apply more so than others in your council and in the work that you're doing. But what we're going to show today is really that opportunities to learn and grow and opportunities to do what employees do best is a really great place to start. to think about how are we giving opportunities for members to learn and grow and opportunities for them to do what they do best. What we know from research from Gallup, which is a research entity that does a lot of work, a lot of research and work in the workspace. So looking at and thinking about leadership, organizational and company kind of management, thinking about what makes employees and what makes organizations work. They have developed a series of 12 statements called the Q12 that identify some of the key areas that people look to or can be identified as ways to recognize if employees will be engaged in their work and if people are going to be kind of motivated, productive, having that emotional connection to the work you're doing. And we want to focus on 3 of these areas, and all 12 of these statements are available in the slides and will be available in the resources after. But the 3 that I would like to focus on right now are number 3, at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. Number 6, that there is someone at work who encourages my development. And number 12, this last year, I've had opportunities at work to learn and grow. And again, although these are focused in the at work, so in the traditional sense, that would be at somewhere where you go and get paid, have a more structured kind of job. This is very relevant as well for when we're thinking about our council members. So members have opportunities to do what they do best every day. There's someone in the council who encourages their development. So other members, staff, associated leaders in that work. Or this last year, I've had opportunities as a council member to learn and grow. These can be key indicators, again, of engagement, of that productivity, of feeling connected to the work that's being done. And in our councils, we know that that's a key way that we work to get things done, right? That we work to meet our mission is through our councils, council members feeling engaged, feeling connected to the work that we're doing. This is further supported by research by Blessing White, which is another organization that does a lot of research in this realm around leadership, organizational management, kind of best practices in that. And what they find that to get into engagement, and on the screen kind of has a funnel leading down to the word engagement, it kind of takes 3 areas: opportunity to apply talent, plus room for career development or room for development and growth, and 3, a chance to be trained and grow as a professional. So as we're thinking about in our councils, how are we providing those opportunities? Are we having opportunities to apply talent for people to recognize what are their strengths and to use those? Is there room for development? Are we providing trainings and opportunities for them to learn and grow in their role and perhaps in other roles or in other strengths and knowledge areas? And is there a chance to be trained and grow as a professional? How are we recognizing or how are we setting our members up for success in being treated, trained, and growing as professionals? And lastly, the Center for Creative Leadership also has done a lot of research around how do you help support development and growth of leaders within your organizations, members within your councils. And what we know is that through this model, which is the 70-20-10 model of development, is really thinking about the percentages and the ways that we learn. And we know that the classroom style learning, kind of one-way communication, being taught at or being lectured to, is really not an effective way of training. And so we know that that really impacts development and growth only about 10%. But what we know is that it's needed, and it's needed to be paired with other ways and other areas for it to really be a successful 100% development, right? So classroom style training is a great way to jumpstart. It's a great way to share information with people, to kind of get the ball rolling on that information, on that learning. But then we need to pair that with opportunities that are more in line with what's called developmental feedback, which is about 20% of this pie chart on here. And what that shares is, or what that looks like, are things like mentorship opportunities, having small group discussions, having ways where people can bounce ideas off of each other and kind of get that more one-on-one or group discussion, group feedback. And the last piece, kind of the biggest piece of this pie on here, 70%, is on-the-job experiences. And although it's called on-the-job experiences, this is also related to kind of member experiences. Are we giving people an opportunity to apply those talents and apply those new skills or strengths that they learned in the classroom, that they got feedback on through mentorship or through those other ways that we're helping them to learn and grow? So it's not just about that one-way communication, but it's about looking for opportunities then to apply those, for people to practice those, to use those skills and strengths in the work that they're doing. We know that members of councils help to plan and execute strategy of your councils, and they're crucial for facing change. But in councils, members can have skills gaps when it comes to really understanding their own skills and strengths and talents, or knowledge about the state and national trends, and really opportunities to impact change. Nationally, the Association for Talent Development recognized that there were 83% of all organizations have a skills gap, which means that in those organizations and looking at kind of top skills of leaders, things that help to make organizations, councils successful in meeting their goals, in strategic planning, in making changes, in a lot of the things that your councils are working to do, there's a skills gap. There's something that might be missing. And development and leadership training, education, and knowledge training are great ways to help lessen that skills gap, to help recognize what are the needs that we have as a council, what are the things that our council members have that we bring to our work, and what are some areas where maybe we could be supporting them more, or we could be offering more development opportunities. Leadership development and learning opportunities can really help to close these gaps. What we also know is that organizations often focus on the highest level of leadership or those most involved members to develop. Research shows that while 83% of organizations believe it's important to develop leaders at every level, so in this survey, they looked across organizations, across industries, and leadership in that organization, and leaders across those organizations shared that it was important to develop leaders at every level. But only 5% of those businesses had implemented leadership development at all levels. So thinking about what kinds of skills and what kinds of opportunities do our members and our councils need, and are we offering those varied types of opportunities for growth and development and learning? Are we looking at and thinking about across our membership, across those that we're working with, that we're supporting, that we're bringing into our council work? How are we recognizing not just those that are most engaged or those in the highest levels of leadership, but those across our membership? When we take a different approach and focus on development opportunities for all, we can see improved performance and productivity of members and their efforts, and we can better attract and retain talent in our members. We can keep committed members engaged while also bringing new members in. What we do know from John Maxwell, one of the most noted leadership experts of this time, is that the single biggest way to impact an organization is to focus on leadership development. There's almost no limit to the potential of an organization that recruits good people, raises them up as leaders, and continuously develops them. So thinking in terms of the work that the councils do, there's a big opportunity to impact systems, and it starts with engaging members and developing their knowledge, strengths, talent. But we know when it comes to development, there are a number of effective strategies that we're now going to share with you. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Caitlin, to share that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Chat. Do I need to swap the presenter view?
No, it's good.
Wonderful. Okay. So to build on what Kristen shared, specifically about how to develop and some overarching strategies for how we can think about developing members and staff of our councils, I first want to share with you an approach that's backed by evidence that frames all of the work that the National Leadership Consortium does and can frame your approaches to development as well. So we know from research and also from the work that we've done across the world that Kristen talked about with almost 3,000 leaders, that strengths-based approaches or focusing on what's right with people and what people do well is an incredibly effective strategy. And so this quote from Gallup says, "We found that there's significant potential in developing what's innately right with people versus trying to fix what's wrong with them." When we take a strengths-based approach, the principles or the underlying work that we do in these approaches align not only really well with best practices and person-centered supports and the values of our field, but like I said, they're also shown by researchers like Gallup to be more effective. So sometimes we refer to this as a paint in the bucket approach because it's a nice analogy to think about building people up by filling their bucket rather than tearing them down or making them feel depleted by pouring out of their bucket. But essentially, when we talk about a strengths-based approach, what it means, we're looking at first what individual members of our teams, of our councils do well, or what our council does well as a whole, and then focusing on what our strengths are first, and then learning from those strengths. This doesn't necessarily mean that we don't recognize areas for improvement. It just means that we start from our strengths and we learn from our strengths. So if as a council, we have a real strength in living our values, we are incredibly focused on promoting inclusion across the work that we do. And we have council members who have a lot of experience and knowledge in promoting inclusion within systems. Then we start to look at first, what is it that we do that makes inclusion such a priority, makes us so passionate about it, makes us so great at making systems change related to inclusion, and how do we learn from those things to build in other areas where we want to get better in. You do that with individual skills and strengths as well, but I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a second. So like I said, these approaches are backed by research. We've got research on this slide from Gallup and then also from the VIA Institute on Characters, which found that when organizations such as councils focus only on the strengths of their individual employees, members, and also of the strengths of the organization or the council as a whole, what they found are very similar to what Kristen talked about previously: higher productivity, profitability, lower turnover. But I really want to focus on this employee engagement one, because we know that when we focus on strengths, we are better able to bring people in and engage them in the work that we do and keep them passionate about the work that we do. So committing to strengths-based approaches is in a way really honoring the deep impact that leaders can have in so many areas of our service system and so many areas of the work that we do in our field. We know from research and, like I said, from our work with almost 3,000 leaders worldwide, that leadership is critical. One example that I like to share is a study by Susan Parrish. It is from 2005, but I think it's fundamental and just really a great study that shows the impact that leaders can have. So Susan and her team from Brandeis looked at deinstitutionalization movements in 2 states and compared the 2 states. And so what they found is that in one state, there was really strong, coordinated, collaborative leadership that worked well with people with lived experiences, including people with disabilities and families. And in the other state, while they were really committed to the principles of deinstitutionalization, their leadership was not as strong. And so of all the factors that impacted the success of the deinstitutionalization movements in those 2 states, leadership was a big one. It was an essential one that made one of the states much more successful than the other. So we know that when leaders have the skills, the knowledge, the support, the resources, and the connections to lead effectively, so when all of those things are in place and we provide the developmental structures and support that leaders need, what we find is that we have more effective leaders. Leaders are personally more confident. They're able to contribute more. Teams tend to move towards a growth mindset. They show more dedication in not only the work that they do, but also in continuing to develop others. agencies or councils tend to become more successful and sustainable in systems transformation. They're better able to achieve their mission or their 5-year strategic goals. And then finally, when councils are led by, or councils develop leaders and give them or support them to develop the skills, the knowledge, the strengths, and the connections that they need, they tend to be more effective in systems change and systems process or progress and advocacy as well. A quick study, Kristen also quoted Zippia before, but a quick study by Zippia, however, found that only 10% of people are natural leaders. So essentially, like Kristen laid out, using strengths-based approaches and other strategies is really essential in building leaders in our councils. Not because we don't have great leaders already, but because a lot of us, myself included, are not necessarily natural leaders. So when we really focus on building people's strengths, we strengthen the councils as a whole as well. So Ricky, when Ricky introduced us, they shared that we would start, or we would talk about some strengths of individual and organizational assessments, so that we can understand the current strengths and areas or opportunities for improvement within individual council members and then also within our councils as a whole. So what I want to do is I want to talk a bit about some assessment approaches and then some benefits of individual and group assessments. And then if you look at some of they might not be on the app already or in the resource, but we will share a resource with you. It's a multiple pages, not just one page, document that has a list of different types of assessments that you can use that can be helpful for people, individual people on your councils, or individual members of your councils, or staff in your councils, or they can be helpful for group assessments as well. In this resource list, some of these assessments are paid assessments, meaning they cost something to use. Some of them are free to use, and then some of them are online surveys, many of them are, and then we also included a couple of print surveys or print assessments that can be helpful. I just want to say that the list that we sent is not in any way exhaustive. It's just surveys and assessments that we at the National Leadership Consortium love to use and use quite often in the work that we do. So when you use assessments to understand the strengths, the individual and then the group strengths within your councils, what it helps us to do is it helps us to, do many things, but I'm going to talk about 4 of them. So first, it helps us to use targeted development approaches really well. I have a great example when we were doing some training a while back for some leaders in advocacy and disabled leaders in advocacy in one state. We were doing a lot of work with them, coaching, mentoring, things like that, to support them to enhance their leadership skills. And so each of them set some leadership skill goals for themselves. And one person in particular set a goal of being a better communicator. She had gotten some feedback from others that she worked with that she could be a better communicator, could be more clear, a little bit more maybe assertive, things like that. And so she wanted to do that. But we started with some assessments as opposed to just starting with like communication support and communication coaching. And what we found is that she was a pretty good communicator. She needed some support in building her confidence, because that confidence was what would help her to demonstrate those communication skills. So when we use assessments, then we can use more targeted development approaches so that we're not just saying, I think we need to focus on this, let's develop it. We can really get down to what are the strengths that we have, and then what are the challenges that we have that we really want to focus on. The next reason that assessments can be really helpful for us as individually within our councils, and then also as councils as a whole, is that they can help us to stay focused on our strengths. When we know what our strengths are, like I said, we can build from there. There's a great assessment called Clifton Strengths. It used to be called Strengths Finders, if you're familiar with that, but now it's same assessment, same questions, called the Clifton Strengths, that we like to use, and it's listed on that resource that I shared with you. But one group that we've used it with a lot are direct support professionals, and some leadership development that we've done with them. And what we found is that when we use that strengths-based approach, what DSPs say is, I know I've always been doing these things, but this helps me name it. This helps me say, you know what, I'm really good at this. Help me to take the lead in this, in our team, in our work, or something like that. So when you use those assessments, and particularly to focus on strengths, what you might find is that you've got people on your council who can take different leadership roles that they might not have been taking because they bring those strengths. You're really an excellent strategic thinker, an excellent strategic facilitator. Maybe you can help us to facilitate or to lead the committee to generate our next strategic plan or something like that. The next real benefit of using assessments in the work that we do, or to develop individual and group council members, is that it helps us to understand areas of strength and need across the team. So again, not only does it help us to understand, if I take the assessment, what my strengths are, but if we have multiple people on the teams who are on the councils who take these assessments, it helps us to understand what their strengths are across the team. For instance, on that resource page, there's a great assessment called the Foresight. And so what the Foresight does is it looks at your problem-solving style, and you can map your style with other styles, with the styles of other people on your team or in your groups. And so the very cool thing about that is that I can look and see, okay, so I am great at developing and coming up with ideas. I'm not so great at implementation, but I know that Kristen is really good at implementation. So we are perfect pairs as co-directors. And if I'm moving forward thinking about how to develop the team, I would always pair us together. And then finally, another real benefit to using assessments in your council is because they point to opportunities for collaboration, peer-to-peer learning, and support. So they can show you opportunities where maybe a mentor or a coach would be really helpful, or maybe you pair two people who have similar or different areas of strength, who can teach each other and who can learn with each other and can support each other to develop. So like I said, we created a list of all of the, or not all of, many of the assessments that we like to use. And we posted them for you, or we're going to share them with you. The assessment itself, this is the top part of it. So it'll look like this. So it'll share with you the assessment, whether it's a personal or group assessment, the skills that it looks at, a link to the source on the document, or if it's a print assessment, then it'll have lists of it, or it'll list them on the following pages, and then it'll tell you whether it's a paid or unpaid, or whether there's a cost associated with it, because we know that that's something that we definitely need to consider when we're deciding which assessments to use. So when you're thinking about how to assess strengths on your teams, you can look at both formal and informal approaches. So formal approaches might be those online or print or assessments that already exist. Benefit to them, they tend to be validated, and they tend to be a little bit more objective, because again, you're looking at a measured set of skills that many people have used before. But you can also create some informal assessments in your teams as well. You could do some focus groups with people, or you could have some interviews, either by an outside interviewer or someone on staff who interviews council members or things like that, to ask people, what are your strengths? What areas of skills do you bring to the team? Things like that. The great thing about informal assessment approaches is that they can be a little bit more personalized. They can be a little bit more accessible. Many of the assessments that have been developed over time have not been developed with this accessibility, especially plain language in mind. However, like I said, they can be a little bit more biased, or don't rely on people to know themselves well to be able to share. You can also use individual types of assessments and then group types of assessments to understand the council's strengths. Individual assessments will tell you about each person's different strengths, leadership skills, conflict styles, problem-solving styles, things like that. What we recommend when you're thinking about assessing different strengths or individual strengths on your councils is that you look at assessments that focus on style over assessments that, if you ever remember taking those magazines, or I did like Teen Vogue or something like that, and it was like, how friendly are you? And then you would get a score of like 0 to 10, you're not friendly at all, 10 to 20, you're kind of friendly, and kind of like a scale like that. We tend to stay away from those when we're measuring different leadership skills or different developmental skills that people bring to the work that they do, not because they're not good or there's not a place for them, but when we understand styles, then we can talk about everybody having strength related to styles, as opposed to you're a good communicator, you're not a good communicator, that kind of thing. You can also look at group profiles. On this list, we have a psychological safety assessment where you can assess the psychological safety of your council based on some validated practices. There are culture assessments, how engaged people are, things like that can be really helpful as well. The wonderful thing about assessments is that they are great building blocks and can point you in the direction of where to go next or where to develop your team. So if you do a set of assessments, you can think it can point to these are the speakers or the facilitators or the next exercises or the skills that we want to develop on the team based on where our strengths are and based on where our opportunities for improvement are as well. The only caveat that I want to share to doing assessments, if you want to think about how to do those to develop others on your councils, is that you want to make sure that you're able to be responsive to assessments. Don't assess the conflict style of members of your council if you're not going to then do something to help people get into conflict more effectively or help people understand each other's conflict style, right? When we assess people and take that time, or ask people to fill out assessments and take that time, we want to use it in meaningful ways. So there are some great strategies in addition to assessment, or that can build from assessment, that can get you into some of the core or key things that make investment and development worth it for people on your council. So when you are thinking about how to develop others on the council, you want to consider things like using an authentic approach to development, or developing the skills that help our councils better live our values. And then also think about how we can track how well we develop or how well that development helps us live our values. So you want that to be kind of like a cyclical process, right? Which means that you could use frameworks such as these that are founded in like an authentic leadership approach, meaning that there's alignment between what we say is important, what we do, what we measure and look for, and then what happens. So for instance, if we say it's important that our council is welcoming and respectful to people from all different backgrounds and cultures, what we do is we might look at our recruitment strategies, our welcoming and our onboarding strategies. We might look at our practices to make sure that everyone's ideas have equal weight and things like that. We might measure the psychological safety of our councils, or look at assessments of inclusion on the council. And then what we want to do is track what happens. Does what we say that is important actually end up being what happens based on what we're measuring and what we're doing to improve our strategies and how we're developing people? You also want to think about developmental strategies or developmental approaches that happen with instead of for people. This is Arnstein's ladder of co-production that comes from the UK. It's based in social work. But essentially what this does is it models that shift of those long-standing practices that some of our organizations in our field have of doing to people to doing with people. And this is really relevant in how we think about developing others. So sometimes people will come to Kristen and I and say, our organization's struggling with this. Can you help us fix this by building this skill? And the people that are coming to us are not the people who we're supposed to quote unquote fix. When we're deciding our developmental approaches, what we want to do is do it with people who are going to be involved in that process. So understanding what strengths do we want to focus on this year? What areas of support do we want to focus on this year? And then think about how do we assess and develop those skills together. And then similarly, our third strategy, we want to make investment in development worth it, is that we want our development strategies to promote belonging. This comes from Eric Carter's research on inclusion and belonging. And so when we think about how we promote belonging and development, we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to learn together. We don't do separate learning or training for specific people on our councils. We want to make sure that trainings are accessible, that they build on the skills of all, and that they recognize the strengths and the contributions of people, of all people who are on our councils. So this says, and I want to end with this, the goal is to develop leaders in ways that promote belonging by leveraging the skills, the gifts, the passions, and the interests of all members that all members bring to the work of the council. So with that, I know that we are a bit short on time. Are there any questions that we can answer or any additional ideas that we can share before we turn it back over? All right. Then what I'd love to challenge you to think about is instead, um, as the um, as the next team is going to present on the strategies that they're using, you might want to think about how do you think your council is doing to support your and other council members' growth and development? And then what ideas did you hear today? I saw some questions in the chat that Kristen already answered about some of the accessibility, about assessments and things like that. But what are some ideas that you heard today that you think that you could use to develop the skills and strengths of council members in your state? With that, I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Caitlin, there is one question in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
No, it just popped up.
Okay.
Would we need to take different approaches if we focus on leadership development period versus leadership development to accomplish agreed upon council goals?
Yes. Yes and no. I mean, there are some leadership skills that can be really universal or useful across different goals. Things like being able to problem solve or understanding people's problem solving skills, decision-making skills, things like that. But there are definitely some leadership skills that will relate to the specific goals that we have of our councils that if you're thinking about the leadership skills that promote those, you might want to be more specific. For example, you might think about many people that we work with want to transform, or one of the goals of the councils, right, is often to transform systems in some way. And so having some leadership skills about what's needed to transform systems, how to stay engaged and motivated, how to bring people along, how to generate buy-in and things like that are some specific skills that might be really helpful that you can think about how to cultivate within your teams, and that are like that more specific leadership development skill.
One more in the chat. Would council members that are not in leadership positions benefit from leadership training?
Yeah, always. Thanks for asking that. And I should have said that from the get-go. We at the Leadership Consortium believe and have seen that all people at all levels working in all different positions are leaders and lead in the ways that they lead. And so any opportunity to develop leadership skills, whether someone is currently in a position that has that title or not, are incredibly beneficial. And they prepare people to move into those positions too in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. That looks like all the questions for now. Okay, so now we're going to hear from a few of our council executive directors and council members about ways that they further leadership development in their councils. And Brandy, I think you'll start first.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Hi, Sydney, welcome.
Hi, Brandy.
All right, so I believe you're gonna help us, yeah, with our slides. Thank you, Amy. Great. So if we could go to the next slide, please. We're from Washington State. And just real quick, I'm Brandy Montz, the Executive Director here at the Washington State Developmental Disability Council. And for accessibility, I am also a Caucasian female and mid-life and have big bushy hair and a head cold. You could probably hear. Sydney, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I am Sydney Kresbach. I am one of the two co-chairs for the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council, and I'm an individual with autism, and I got long, dark blonde hair. And also, I previously served on the Alaska Governor's Council for 3 years.
Thanks, Sydney. Do you want to take it away with the first slide?
Sure, Brandy. So the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council has 25 members. We have a new executive director that started in the fall of 2022. We have several new members started in 2023 as the pandemic ended. And we are determined we need a more accessible, established, and welcoming experiences for council membership and staff.
This is Brandy. Thanks, Sydney. So yeah, that kind of sets the tone for where our council was coming from at the beginning of 2023 and the work that we're going to share with you today. Next slide, please. So we had three kind of pieces to our approach. We looked at a council accessibility assessment. We did a council member feedback survey, and then we are just starting a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative here at the council. And we're going to just tell you a little bit about each of those three approaches that we have been working on in the last year and a half. Next slide, please.
So council accessibility assessments worked with the consultants, One Key Accessibility. You'll have to excuse me. We focus on meeting structures, information such as state plans, council meeting packet, etc. Assessive technology, met with council membership and staff for small group feedback sessions, reviewed materials, and completed reports with suggested next steps.
Great, thank you. And you said One Key just fine, Sydney. One Key Accessibility is an organization out of the tippity top of our state, Bellingham, Washington. It's run by and for people with disabilities. And they came in and helped us look at the accessibility from the council member perspective of information. So we focused on meetings because we're currently and will continue to run hybrid meetings for our council. And then they delved into kind of the packet of information that we give council members at the beginning of each meeting, how we set it up on our website. And then they helped us with some accessibility around tech. So for example, some of our council members don't have a screen reader that reads PDFs, or we have a toolbar on our website that converts the words into different languages and reads them aloud to you. So they're really trying to help us think through different ways to make the information more accessible to more people, so that when our council becomes more diverse, it will be more welcoming and easier for folks to participate. Next slide, please. The second approach was that council member feedback survey. So it was great timing because we were able to collaboratively design it with co-chairs. Like Sydney said, we have two co-chairs in Washington State, that consulting group, One Key Accessibility, and then our council staff. So we designed a survey asking for the perspective of our current council members. We wanted their perceptions and experiences, and we offered multiple ways to complete it. I know we talked a lot about accessibility earlier on today. So we had in-person support at council meetings. We created QR codes and offered online meetings. We also met with folks over the phone and read words and input the responses ourselves as staff. And so after that was all done, we had a pretty good response rate. The results were shared and reviewed by membership and staff. And it was a pretty good, I think, not easy experience for some of the members to hear the perceptions of each other. But that did help us prioritize our membership committee and staff and the work they wanted to focus on. For example, the orientation was one area where folks felt if we put more energy into how folks were onboarded onto the council they would have a much better time understanding what their role was and how to participate. So that's currently a focus for our council. Next slide, please.
So, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, also known as DEI, awarded the Offshoots Consulting's 4-month project for council members and staff. We focus on establishing common understanding, identifying our values and priorities, creating agreements and tools to work together, and train the trainer element to sustain project work.
Thanks, Sydney. Yeah, this is Brandy. So our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative kicked off maybe 2 months ago. And the company we're working with is Offshoots Consulting. We had around, I think, 24 proposals for that RFP, and we're really excited about the response and thinking about, the future for our council around this topic, and how to better understand and welcome folks of races that have not historically been included in the council, as well as folks around our state that have not historically been served by our systems. So that 4-month project, it really boils down to about 3 hours of seat time for the council members for a 4-month period, with the exception of 1 month where we're in person for a day. We coupled that with our development day for our council meeting. And so, yes, the focus is helping council members create common understanding about racism and the history of racism in our state and in our country, identifying what our values and our priorities are as a council, and then creating agreements on how to work together. So, for example, when we have conflict or we don't agree, how are we going to work through that together as a council? And so one of the cool aspects of this project is that they offered a train the trainer element as well. So some folks will get trained in the content. Last slide. At 17 seconds under, I'm sorry. If you need any more information or want to reach out, there's our contact information. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Brandy and Sydney. You actually have a number of requests in the chat for you to share your survey questions. So you might have some people reaching out for that.
Great, Amy, is that something I should just let people reach out to me about, or should I send it to you, or what's the easiest way do you suggest for that?
Either way, if you want to have people reach out to you with requests, Brandy's contact information is right here. That might be the fastest way.
Great.
If you want to just reach out to Brandy and she could send you if she's willing to share.
Yeah, of course we're willing to share. Thank you.
And then you did have one question regarding your surveys. What was the response rate from your council members and stakeholders?
Yeah, so I'm a social worker on purpose, so I'm doing the math right now. We had 14 of 25 council members respond.
Great. Thank you so much, Brandy and Sydney, for presenting.
Thank you for having us.
And Kim, if you're ready.
Hi, everybody, and I'm just confirming, Mr. Peterson, I already saw you on, to make sure that you are here. Bob?
I'm here.
You're here. It's great to see you, by the way. So hi, everybody. I'm Kim Mercer-Schneider. I'm the director of the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities, and I am joined here by none other than Mr. Robert Peterson. His bio is in your is in the list of the link that Cheryl said. I highly recommend read about Bob. He's amazing, but longtime advocate, longtime DD Council member. Bob, anything else you'd like to say to introduce yourself?
No, I think you covered it. Like Kim said, I've been doing advocacy work for a long time, and I'm excited to meet all of you and be here today.
Awesome. So next slide, please, Amy. So here's us. We are the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities. Our mission statement is that we are here to lead change in Illinois so that all people with intellectual and developmental disabilities exercise their right to equal opportunity and freedom. Next slide, please. So when we were faced with or when we were asked to sort of figure out or to provide information about how we provide some extra development to our council members, it really rooted me back into where we were when we decided that we needed to start doing it. And our issue was that there was never enough time. And I'm sure that everybody on this call can relate to that feeling. Our council meetings were justifiably packed with current topics. It did not leave us any time to reflect or to dig deep into a lot of topics. Our council meetings seem to just cover many things topically, not a lot of deep dive, and not a lot of time to do so. And so it started as a need for us to be able to really spend the time talking about our grant projects in depth. We surveyed members as to what topics they would like to dig into, and then it quickly expanded past using the time to focus on our grant topics and took off quickly as a way when we asked folks what they would like to get out of some of these opportunities, that we realized that there was all kinds of opportunities for education and leadership training that folks really wanted. So the other thing is that we started these, kicked them off right before the pandemic hit, and we were all stayed home. Right in early 2020 is when we had our first meeting, and then I think our first full development day in person, and I think literally the next day we were all told to stay home. I think I remember that's how the timing worked, but it was actually a pretty awesome thing to kick off for that time period. So we felt a little bit lucky in that regard. And go to the next slide, please. So we created development days. Bob, would you like to tell the group what is an ICDD development day?
It's a day where we all get together and we learn about different things, and we get to tell our ideas, and they get to share and tell what's going on with the country, and it's just a great thing to have those days and have those come to share things, and that's it's very important to do that, because like like people said, it's it's very important to know what's going on in between having our having our council meetings, having meetings in between meetings to know.
Yep, and we're going to get to the logistics in the next slide, Bob, but real quick, are these highly encouraged or are they mandatory for folks to come?
They're highly encouraged.
Highly encouraged. But we knew that we couldn't mandate a full day of meetings in between our council meetings for everyone. We didn't want to put that level of pressure on folks, but they are highly encouraged, and we do get good attendance. So next slide, and we'll get into more logistics, Bob, the details that you're talking about. So when do our development days take place?
In between our council meeting and they are virtual, and they are also they go from one they go 10 to 1 and then or 10 to 12, and then 2 to 1, and then 1 to 3, and so total they're 4 hours long, but that's when they are.
Yep. And we offer a break in the middle. So we've realized in our virtual meetings that the 10 to 12 hour break in the middle, 1 to 3, sort of cadence works well for everybody. And then you get that lunch break in the middle. And we usually try to take some breaks between that 2-hour chunk as well. Next slide, please, Amy. So in the topics we've covered, and we include now our development days in our annual calendar so that folks can plan for them way ahead of time to make sure that they're available to attend. And they're called, we call them council development days. I just saw that question in the chat. Illinois Council development days is what we call them. And so we get people's sort of full days sort of set aside, which put us as a part of our annual calendar, so that folks have plenty of time to get there and set aside the time. So some of the topics that we've covered, we call them grantee showcases. And so we will bring in any number of our projects or folks that are willing. We give them a full, topic of time, like maybe an hour or so at least, to try to fit in as many as we can, where they can really deep dive into their projects, talk to us about the barriers that they're seeing, that the successes that they're having, and have a dialogue with our council members about how the projects are going. And so that has really just helped a lot of people understand all the work that our projects are doing and the breadth of our investments. Bob, would you like to tell folks? Oh, we only have I think we're running out of time. We'll try to pick this up. So Bob, do you want to talk about how we do our legislative sessions?
We
Overview?
we had some come in to tell us about what's happening currently with current legislation, and that day that we do that is a day that we open it up to the public, and
and Bob, so our legislative days are the ones that we bring folks in to talk about the bills. You're getting at a future of the field, which please now. So our legislative session is we like run through all of our bills. We talk about things that are happening with our friends from the legislature. Will come in and tell us about things that we need to know. And then how about you take future of the field and how we open that up to the public?
Well, we have a day that we open it up to the public, and we have different people talk to us about different things that are nationally happening, and it's very important. It's a very important. It's good to know what's happening nationally, and it's just a great day to invite everyone in. So that is very helpful.
So we partner with, and just wanted to say quickly, if you want to go to the next slide, Amy, we'll talk a little bit more about future of the field because it's a really cool thing. And maybe all of you could come to our next one. We partner with the National Leadership Consortium on that. So Kristen and Caitlin have been longtime partners of the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities. We really appreciate the partnership with them. They've come in and facilitated for 3 years now, a Future of the Field event. And some of the topics are there, but I just want you to know that they do the planning and the facilitation. They bring in national experts and we open that up. It's almost as if like a statewide conference that we just open up for free for professionals, individuals, families. They can register and log in and join us there. So a lot of great national experts. It's been really fun working with Caitlin and Kristen on that. So highly recommend. And Amy, I know we're late.
Thanks,
I'm
Kim.
sorry, Amy.
So you have a couple of questions that you might be able to answer really quick.
Yes.
Do you see agency organization members participating in development days, or are you targeting people with disabilities or family members primarily?
So it's open to our whole membership. So our agency folks come as well, which is also awesome. So it gives an opportunity for the agency folks that are on our council to sort of just really dive in on DD topics for a full day. And then many of them attend, if not the whole thing, at least part of it.
Great. And how do your open meeting laws in your state impact your days? Do they need to be treated like a meeting?
So we do not have, so our Illinois is a state with Open Meetings Act laws in place where we have to have at least 50% of our membership in person to be able to conduct our meetings. And so that when the pandemic emergency unfolded, we had to adjust to getting back into person. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But how we handle these and how we manage and make sure that these are not open meetings where we're making substantive decisions. And I think that is what is the sort of the key piece of, like, we're not voting. It's not a formal meeting. We're not approving anything. It's just an educational opportunity. So therefore not beholden to Illinois' Open Meetings Act. So we're able to handle those virtually.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim and Bob, for presenting.
Thank you. Thanks,
you.
Bob.
Dave?
Yes, thank you, Kim and Bob. My name is Dave Duell. I chair the New York State Council on Developmental Disabilities. My visual description is I'm a white male with graying hair and glasses. I'm wearing a dark blue shirt, and my pronouns are he and his. Right now, I'm sitting at my desk in front of a bookshelf with a blurred background. I have the privilege of moderating a session with self-advocates. In the last hour, it will just be me in this session. So what I'd like to share with you is a brief overview of our council's platform for informal training of leaders. The focus will be on our Lunch and Learn series, but I want to put it in a broad framework. So slide, please. So today we will consider phases of council member development. Phase 1, applying for council membership. In that time, we communicate with each potential council member. New members get acquainted with various staff through the approval process, which is sometimes very lengthy. The new members do an orientation session with the executive director, federal liaison, and a member liaison. I, as the chairperson, meet with them one-on-one several times. We welcome new members officially in a full council meeting. Slide, please. So in joining the council, we send a digital copy of our new council member orientation guide, which is an explanation of how the council functions and what each member's responsibilities are, so they can get acquainted with what is expected of them. Then we match each new member with a mentor for 1 year with a focus on the orientation guide. This is not whole life mentoring like you usually hear about, which is very broad. This is focused for 1 year just on the orientation guide, which is very self-standing. At least that's the way we've designed it. Slide, please. Our council then invites new members to a 3-session Lunch and Learn training series, either live or recorded. It helps to view this series as a funnel that moves from a wide opening at the top representing all connecting agencies to a narrow, personal-focused opening at the bottom of the funnel. In session 1, we focus broadly on how our council connects with the national network of agencies and organizations. So from Health and Human Services to the New York State Council on Developmental Disabilities, we explore the web of critical connecting agencies. The goal of this is to give the new member a functional knowledge of how the agencies work together systemically, answering the question, what are organic connections that give life to our councils? In session 2, and we usually do these in 3 consecutive weeks, in session 2 or week 2, we focus on how our council connects with our state network of agencies, particularly our designated state agency. A leading representative from our DSA, the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, presents their perspective on the interagency relationship. Here, the goal is to understand how we as a council are both accountable to our DSA and resourced by it. In session 3, week 3, we focus personally on how council members connect with and get involved in their council. We do a deep dive into the dreams and the gifts of self-advocates as they engage as citizens in their community. More on this in the final session today. Also, we try to offer a clear picture of the opportunity each member has to advocate for their own needs, as well as represent others and their needs. And finally, we offer council member resources, personal instruction, particularly with staff, and the council webpage. Slide, please. Phase 3, engaging a council role, we invite new council members to serve in a council leadership role. Presently, most of our meetings are led by self-advocates, and some of them are in process, of course. The goal is for self-advocates to have a regular titled role in addition to being council members. And finally, we try to ensure ongoing that the council member is involved and developing in leadership ability while they serve. Slide, please. This is phase 4, finishing council term. As the council member winds down their term, we informally suggest options and opportunities for local, state, or national post-council term leadership roles through the State Appointments Agency Office, council agency representative members that are part of our council and that we know well, or opportunities that appear online that somebody happens to see. We send off the council member formally with appreciation in a full council meeting. Finally, last slide, council concerns addressed. What is the primary goal of this phase of their journey? It is to build confidence and competence through an enjoyable and enriching hands-on council experience with a view to personal development. How about staffing? Ideally, our entire council conducts the member development program together. For example, seasoned council members mentor incoming members. What about funding? This program requires little additional funding beyond staff time, which of course is significant. Well, that's a quick view of our council member development focus on which we are building our in-house leadership training for self-advocates. It is a work in progress, but we believe we are moving in the right direction. Thank you for your attention. And now I'll turn this session over to Kristen Larson and Matt Kaslan of the Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities. Kristen and Matt.
Oh, great. Thanks, Dave. What a great presentation. All of you are giving great presentations and we're learning so much. Yes, we were ambitious and have a lot of slides. We're going to do our best to keep it at 7 minutes. We've been practicing. My name's Kristen and I serve as Executive Director for NCDD. And I'm joined today by Matt Kaslan, who serves as our Vice Chair and Self-Advocate. And we just want to talk about how we support our members to grow as leaders, especially our self-advocate members. Next slide. So one of the things or lenses that we use in this is we rely or really enjoy the Beyond Tokenism report that was funded by the Michigan DD Council back in 2014. And Dr. Mark Friedman, who is one of the authors, he's done some work with us here in Nebraska. And really that report just gives us strategies to make sure that people with disabilities are not treated like a token, that they're fully included into the council. Next slide. So here's just some different ideas of how to do that. I really recommend you looking over the report, but really we want to look for meaningful ways for folks to contribute and provide them the mentoring and support that is available. Next slide, please.
The Nebraska governor appoints 25 NCDD members. Federal law states at least 60% of the members have to be an adult with either developmental disabilities or IDD. That's an interfamily disabilities within the intermittent family. And NCDD currently has 7 self-advocates on the council. Next slide, please, Amy. How does NCDD emerge members who have a disability? Kristen will get into this also, but I'm going to kind of get a short lay over it. We have a new member orientation and support council members with the self-advocates policy provides assistance with transportation, assistance reviewing meeting materials, personalized care assistance if as needed, encouraging leadership roles and committee involvement. Next slide, please.
Great, well, thank you. And so he touched on our new member orientation, and this is just an orientation that we provide to all members, including our agency members. And we just do a really good deep dive into what the DD Act has to say, what our mission is and how we impact advocacy, capacity building, and systemic change. We learn about the DD network partners, what the federal role is in providing oversight, and of course, the federal reporting and the state plan work. Next slide, please. Additional topics include, of course, we want folks to know about what our major activities are and how they correspond to the state plan goals and objectives. We really focus on what the council member responsibilities are, as well as what the council member or council staff has for their responsibilities to make sure that they understand how they're different. And then we'll go over some logistics as well. Next slide, please. This, I'm not going to read the slide, but it's there in the slide deck if you'd like to view it later. And this is our self-advocates policy that Matt mentioned. Again, we make room in our budget to provide funding to support a self-advocate the self-advocate can choose the person of who they want to provide this kind of support. It can be support with transportation and all those sorts of things. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and go to the next slide, please.
Okay. Facilitating members evolving at meetings. The first part we usually have to show up about 30 minutes before the council meetings, and we usually have like a 30-minute period to network with our partners and have council meet with other council members and provide mentoring opportunities for our new members. And we also have agenda from items from member updates. Time is provided by the council members to share any advocacy or disability activities they have been involved with since the last meeting. Chair may also ask direct questions to self-advocates during discussion time for their perspective. Support staff may encourage self-advocates to share their opinions. Next slide, Amy.
So Amy, I'm just going to ask you to go through or just quickly go through these pictures of folks, but we wanted to show some pictures of our self-advocates really truly engaged at events outside of our council meetings, including proclamation events, legislative work, support, providing additional support. And one of the reasons that I think that our self-advocates have really stepped up into leadership positions is because Nebraska redid our bylaws or updated them in 2019. And the major change in those bylaws was that we shifted to having standing committee chairs run for office as opposed to the elected chair appointing them. So self-advocates have really stepped up and since then, and they've also run for other council chair positions or vice chair. But currently we have 4 self-advocates that are serving in a leadership role, and they're looking forward to coming to the July conference to really learn and grow professionally as leaders. Next slide.
Okay. This slide, the next few slides are about me and everything, so I'm gonna run this through pretty quickly. I was appointed to NCDD in November of 2019, and I am serving my final term through October of 2025. In 2019, I was serving on the Nebraska Youth Leadership Council. The NCDD reached out to the facilitator to encourage members to apply to NCDD. I was appointed to go join the NESILC, that's our State Independent Living Council, State Rehabilitation Council, known as SRC, Olmsted Plan work groups, and Liberty Healthcare Statewide and Human Legal Rights Advisory Committee. I am very passionate to enjoy collaborating with almost every council discussion. Next slide, please, Amy. Fun fact. I ran as planning committee chair at my first meeting ever on the council. And I have been running for leadership positions ever since. And the thing is, I have ran for council chair for the past 3 years. In federal fiscal year 2024, I was elected vice chair. And 2023, 2 years ago, last year, I was planning to serve on the planning committee chair. Next slide, please, Amy. I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'm trying to pick this up here. This is basically kind of like what the self-advocates policy is. Basically, I have a self-supported staff go with me up to Lincoln to do all these meetings and everything. And she does transportation. She helps me with the meeting materials. She goes through all the business sides that I need to have for so I can go into the meetings and be successful. This next part is basically I don't just do one committee. There are 3 of them, and I do all 3. So, and then the bottom one is that I got the actual chance to I made a point to Kristen and Nikki over there, our staff, to let them know that I want to sit by the chair at all times. So that I can learn and everything. So, and then I also got to make sure I got to do the next icebreaker that we usually do at the beginning of the meetings. Next slide, please, Amy. This is our contact information if you want to talk to Kristen Larson, our executive director, and me. I have my information on there if you want to talk to me, and then I can get you a hold of Kristen. Then we can see if you guys have any questions. Thank you for letting us talk.